Hey, welcome back to the Passive Buddies podcast. In today's episode, guys, we are taking you to our virtual library and we're going to give our suggestions on our top 3 business books that we recommend you read to get to the next level. What do you do when the dream of an online business makes you work harder than a day job would? The answer? You build passive income. On the Passive Buddies podcast, we cover the myths behind passive income and how to build true financial and time freedom. Welcome to the Passive Buddies podcast. See, now this is always an interesting one. Before we get into the books, Brandon, right? I've heard 2 scenarios. People are like, read as much as you can and read as many books as you can. And then I've heard other people say, read a certain amount of books, specific books, over and over again. What's your thoughts?
I think that you need to take action in either regard. If you don't take action, nothing's going to happen. So I think that in order to gain a certain amount of knowledge, you should read a wide variety of books and kind of see what you want to kind of are willing to deep dive into, because if you're not willing to deep dive into something, then you are not going to kind of master it. So I think that there's a certain point where you get diminishing returns, and within the diminishing returns, you're not going to get what you put into that book. So I would say that read a lot really quickly and then start taking action, and then that's all the reading you need to get done. You only really need to read like 2 or 3 good books in a year once you've made your first like couple thousand. Not a couple thousand, a couple million a year.
See, now my biggest mistake when I started reading business development and self-development books was you hear all the influencers go, read this book. And I went, yeah, sound okay, will do. So I read these books and I read them for checklist purposes. And that was my biggest problem. Right. I read them as if like, right, okay, I've read that one, right, fine, next one. And it was only when I went back and went, right, well, I've got all these books. I was like, can I remember stuff from X book or Y book? I went, well, it's only when you go back and reread it, you go, now that makes sense. Because obviously you're further on in your journey. You go, yeah, that makes more sense. Yes, I can implement that now when I didn't feel like I could. So I feel like, yeah, I went through and read them as checklists, and that was really, really bad. Like, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad first, or one of the first ones, and it was like, right, okay, I've read it, so I can talk a good game now. But did I implement anything? I just could talk a good game, and it was only when I went back and went, right, okay, no, let's start implementing that. And as you say, implementation is the biggest. Like knowledge isn't power if you don't implement. So it's only implemented knowledge that equals power. So you do have to implement as much as you can. And as you go back and reread these, because when you read them first time, you're at a different stage of your journey when you go and read them second time.
Yeah, it's funny because I was just spying on your profile. It was today, and I remember seeing a post that you put that said, what do you mean I'm not rich yet after 3 months of being online? And I just think that's funny because it's like a lot of people will do these check boxes or these kind of things that people recommend that you need to get done, like read these books and then you'll make it, or follow these steps. But it takes a lot of accumulation of different subject matters, different skill sets, different opinions, your different audience. All these are things you're kind of finding out as an entrepreneur. And so it's good to read these books, but you'll find, I guess, more knowledge every time you read them. And so that's why I think it's good to have a few books, read them a few times, and really understand as you continue to grow. Because, for instance, like the book Traction is probably not someone who's just starting out, because they're not going to get, it's going to be way further in their journey than, say, someone reading maybe Rich Dad Poor Dad, or the next book that you recommended, which was, I think, Expert Secrets.
Yeah, so basically, we've nailed two on my list. So yeah, obviously, one of the first ones I'd suggest is going through the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, and the reason for that is like it's not to me it's not enough to just have an online business and work in your online business, because then you've just got that self-created job. And Rich Dad Poor Dad's got a very good explanation and walkthrough on how you go from day job to self-employed to business owner and to be free. That obviously, I think they call it the cash flow quadrant. That whole scenario is pretty crucial, and for people who don't sort of understand that before they get into online business, they're actually, to me, they're setting themselves up to fail, because people see like business is like, and a lot of people do it like in offline as well. Like, oh, I've got a business. Okay, cool. Do you earn money when you're not working? No.
Right.
Well, then you don't have a business. You have a self-employed, self-created job. And don't get me wrong, that self-created job still takes like guts. It still takes energy, and it's still an achievement. But that isn't the reason why you got into business, was it? Like, that wasn't the
Right.
reason you started on your own, got rid of your boss, or anything like that. It was actually to be free. And just by working for yourself, but you're permanently tied to your desk, you're not exactly free. So you actually need to take us that next level. And that's why I say Rich Dad Poor Dad is definitely one of the best, that maps out exactly what that sort of is and what that looks like and what stage you are in terms of cash flow.
Yeah. I mean, I was a personal trainer, and as a personal trainer, you were a coach, and you remember just you thought you were your own boss, but what happens is you end up having a lot of different bosses. So I had clients at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m. And if I wasn't, I had a boss that had to show up for each of those times. And if I didn't show up, that boss wasn't going to pay me. And so it's important to have those systems in place so that you can work on your business instead of in your business. Or just like you said, Bryan, that if you do not have, when you go to bed, then your business isn't running and making sales for you. Do you really have a business? And so I think that's super important to be able to know the difference and be able to distinguish the difference between the two.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think obviously then going from that, like once you understand whether you are self-employed or self-created job scenario, or whether you are building a business, I think the best book I read for that in terms of getting to that stage was like the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Like, that book completely changed how I operated. People laugh at me now because they're like, "Oh, you never pick up the phone. Well, don't ring me then." Like, just being that
I love that.
protective of your time, because people want to zap it away left, right, and center. And that 4 Hour Work Week is like, if you let people take control of your time, then obviously you're not going to get anywhere, and you'll permanently be tied to that business. So the 4 Hour Work Week was an absolute game changer in terms of how to operate and automate a business, so you don't have to be there as half as often as what most business owners are.
Yeah, I still haven't read that book. I need to. I mean, I understand the concepts behind it because I've looked at the clip notes and that sort of thing. But that's really one book I really want to read, because I think it's a good gives you a good idea of how valuable our time is.
Oh, most definitely. What about you? I've dropped two so far. What about you?
My favorite book, so I would say The Slight Edge is probably one of the top ones, being that everything is like the compound effect. And if you are either compounding upward or compounding downward, depending on what you're doing, it's going to have a huge effect over time. So if you look at exponential growth, and you look at it being a positive or a negative effect, as time goes on, that compounding effect, if you're doing something that's constantly making sales, one sale a day, one sale a day, and one sale a day, as time goes on, and say it's a subscription model, it's going to go quite up. Like, I mean, 30 turns into 120 a month, and you're now making quite a bit of money. And then you can obviously take that money and reinvest it. But if you're not making any sales a month and you're constantly putting stuff on your credit card, that compounding effect towards you is not going to be a good thing, and you're going to lose a lot of money. So it just talks about how the compound effect over time is really good for us. And that's what that slight edge is. It's that just slight um, movement up or down in your business. So that's one of my favorite books. The second one is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think that's how you say it. It's been a while since I've read that book. But the reason I've really liked that book is because it's really how to talk to people and how to mirror them, and how to win friends. And so essentially, I'm not a very like extroverted person, but I will being able to match people or mirror them whenever we're talking, or when you're having a discussion with someone, is a very good trait to have. And so I think that is a really good book. And it just talks about when someone's leaning in, or when they're leaning back, tonality, volume, and pitch. So all these different things help with kind of talking to people, or even doing podcasts or interviews. So I think that's a really great book. So those are two of my books. Do you have a third?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like I've literally How to Influence or How to Win Friends and Influence People was one of the first books I bought, and yet it's one book that I've still not opened. I've put it on my desk a few times. Like, come on, you need to read this, and it's one that I've still not done. It's just
I think it's a good one. I need to reread it, because I always hear people saying, like, after they've read it like a second or a third or a fourth time, they just keep learning from it. So I need to definitely go back, and because it's been like a few years and it's always stuck with me. So I can only imagine what I could pick up going around the second time.
And then, do you know what? Like, I know we spoke about before, obviously before the show, obviously we listed our 3 books and obviously what we're going to talk about. I'm actually going to switch my third one.
Okay.
And the reason is obviously, so my third one is actually Think and Grow Rich.
Okay.
And I've switched that out from Expert Secrets, although I absolutely love Expert Secrets. Expert Secrets is fantastic, but I think obviously Think and Grow Rich is all about mindset, isn't it? It's all about that mindset, that manifestation, and bringing that success to you, and how you actually go out and do that. Now, in online business, and in any business, you're going to get so many knockbacks. You're going to get constantly, like, it's always an obstacle. It's always a battle. Like, it never gets easier. It just gets different. The obstacles become different. Now, so for mindset, you always have to be trying to improve that, and you always have to build out those tools in order to cope with things. And we spoke about that the other day. Now, Think and Grow Rich is absolutely fantastic for that. It opens your eyes into, like, how negative your brain and mindset actually can be, and how the slightest thing can have a real big effect from your mindset if you don't know how to control it properly. And I think for any entrepreneur, because it becomes a lonely game, doesn't it? It becomes a very, very lonely game. So for every entrepreneur, that learning those tools, tricks, and mindset hacks in order to grow your business and cope when things aren't going well, and how to compound it when it is going well from a mindset point of view, it's definitely traits you need, and it's something you will always be working on. It's definitely a book that you should be reading.
I think that's a really great book. It's funny. There's a lot of great little things you can take from that book. He interviewed like a bunch of people, right? And it was all about their mindsets about those famous people at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't.
Yeah. He basically dedicated like 20 years of his life or something, didn't he, to go on and interviewing all the most successful people in the country, and what made them who they are.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know that my third book is Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, which is exactly kind of what you're saying, is that mindset of how to think of like a millionaire would think, and how they would put their investments, and how they actually think of kind of on their daily basis. One that always stuck to mind is like taking ownership of what happens, because if you take ownership of what happens, then you can't blame something else, and you can only take responsibility responsibility for your own actions. And that's kind of like what you're saying with the millionaire, with just mindset, is having that mindset that you can achieve anything that you're able to put your mind to. I think is super important. I think those are my 3 books that I have. I mean, there's a million other books, obviously, like the book on negotiating real estate, all sorts of fun little books that I've learned to invest in real estate, to invest in business, how to grow a SaaS company. You've mentioned a few books on marketing that you like outside these 3 books. Any final words that you want to add to our top 3 book list?
The final words would be make time to read. It does 100% improves your ability to run a business from a mindset, marketing, or any other standpoint. You need to be, and don't get me wrong, it's hard. Like, obviously, if you're driving to work during the day, then take an audio or get an audio book, get out Audible, go and listen to those books, make notes when you can. If you're in an office job, put your headphones in and just work through while listening to these things. You have to try and fit this in. And I struggle sometimes as well. You have to try and fit these things in because all of these experts have put that time, energy, and effort into basically giving you the tools, telling you what will work. It'd be very daft for us not to be spending $15 on a book and not taking advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think of it's 10, 20, 30 years of their life has been condensed into an hour of your time or 3 hours of your time, which I think is a great way to speed up time in any business, because you have the blueprints through all these books that allowed them to be so successful. So I think that take the time and really use it to speed up your business.
Awesome, guys. So that is the end of this episode, and we will see you on the next one.
Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Passive Buddies podcast. Have you begun your online journey yet? Or are you stuck on how to get it to work for you? Then why not take our exclusive free course, the 2-day Affiliate Commission Challenge, and start your journey to the rest of your life today. It's the first link in the podcast description and it's totally free. You have nothing to lose, yet everything to gain for you and your family. Enjoy our free gift to you, and the link is below.